Chapter 12. Are we going to ride or are we going to dick around all day? Motorcycle patch from my stall. The morning perspective on where I was didn't give me a lot of hope. There were at least 50 cars in the yard. Were they all waiting to be transported? Was I not the first in line, instead 51st? Ralph came down eventually and he brought his ex-missus and daughter with him. There was a lot not right with the woman, the poor thing, and even less right with the little girl, who could have been anywhere between 6 and 10 years old. Her mother came forward in a very friendly manner and greeted me before launching into why she was wearing a bandage on her arm. I gave her sympathy like she was an 11-year-old, showing off her first broken arm. I wondered if Ralph had done this and schooled her on what to say, so she was just reeling it off ad nauseum, even though I wasn't from the government. It was all a bit deliverance without the danger. The little girl, shy at first, suddenly became the opposite. She jumped in the back of my van and tried on my riding jacket. This was all cute, until she tried to try on my helmet. The minute you drop those things, they're useless, because they may have cracked. I got the helmet on for her, then Ralph decided to photograph her in front of my bike. I kept working away, so much to do before I went. Ralph and I had got the bike out earlier, and I'd said that I'd have to muck around for a while before I left, so they politely left me alone. I'd got a bicycle lock chain and pinned up the stand. The bike worked. I was so thrilled and proud of myself. But on this hot, steamy Brisbane morning, it was turning into stress as I tried to get all the right luggage. I was a real attraction in this household, so they'd all come back down, this time with their son. The poor kid also had inherited some genetic issues from his impaired mother, but he spoke normally and seemed a full quid. He explained the best way to get to the border. We were already in the southwestern suburbs of Brisbane, so it was a hop, skip and a jump. I was getting so frustrated with all the activities going on around me that I decided to just skip the tent and sleeping bag and just pack my panniers with clothes instead. This humidity wouldn't be around in the northern rivers and further south. It's real winter down there. The little girl jumped back into my van, unrolled my bedroll, and found some sarongs and things and put up curtains. She was definitely a lot older than 6, if she could rig up a cubby in that quick time. I was pretty annoyed, but there was no way I was going to get angry with her. I'd already done that more than enough to her dad. Both parents were yelling at her to stop, get out of the van. Over and over that they called her name. She didn't give a fuck. She even told me that she was coming with me. I mean, I didn't blame her. Everything about my life seemed like the best adventure in the world to a kid, and if someone like me had shown up at my parents' place when I was her age, I would have wanted them to take me away too. I shut up the van and decided that I'd worry about the mess when I saw my van again. If I saw my van again. What if I was on a lot of stolen cars? Calm your farm, girl. Time to ride. I left saying nice goodbyes to Ralph and his family, although I asked them not to hang around because I was still doing some stuff with my gear and needed to do this without 3 adults all trying to talk to me like I was their parent, and an actual kid who was getting too near the bike, which was propped up against the trailer and could easily fall. I get that I'm a nice vibe and very exciting from the outside, but I was a stressed out bitch, very shallowly beneath the surface. Ralph should know that. I didn't follow the young fella's verbal instructions. I never can, no matter who it is, and zipped off in the wrong direction. I pulled up, put on the maps, hit play on a music playlist, and wound my way through the beautiful back roads to the border. I didn't know when I'd see the van. Ralph had led me to believe that we'd be going straight through to Sydney. His whole excuse of having to do rest hours here in Brisbane didn't fly. He also basically admitted that it'll go out on the next truck to Sydney, so I had to wait for a back delivery to fill a whole truck before I could take delivery of one van, and it might not even be him transporting it. Ralph was a simpleton, but he was a pretty convincing liar. I couldn't worry about that now. I had other challenges ahead of me. Before I took a right turn at Wollongong and to weave through thick forest-shouldered roads, I pulled up for a slash. I had to lean down to my left from my waist while keeping both feet on the ground to steady the bike. I then fiddled with the combination lock, squinting at the numbers till it fell open. The stand then dropped down and I carefully leaned the bike onto it. The lean defied gravity, as the stand was not at the angle it used to be. This wasn't the welder's fault. The torn iron should have been cut off to make the angle correct, but I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth and tell him how to do it. It'd be a time-consuming journey, and luckily I was a yoga chick who could achieve the necessary bend. Hopefully I wouldn't drop the bike. After riding some roads stripped down to the gravel, full of potholes and corrugations, I was pretty happy to get back on bitumen. If only I'd have known there were roadworks. Could be worse though, it could be raining. I was at a tiny little settlement less than 100 kilometres out of Kyoga when I realised there was no servo in this town. I wouldn't make it with my tiny 12-litre tank. I consulted maps and there was a fuel stop at right angles to the road I'd been. The Northern Rivers is basically like a blood system, so many capillaries eventually leading to thicker veins than the main arteries. I took one of the capillaries and was quite happy not to backtrack. More scenic roads for me. This was a larger town than I'd expected. The fuel stop was a dinky little 1950s one with low warning and old school fuel pumps with a padlock on them. The owner had erected a massive Aussie flag, and as much as I hate that display of nationalism, it's also an indicator that it's biker friendly. Bikes were probably the main traffic out here. Not today though, the place was shut. But my hunch was right. The owner heard the call of my loud muffler and responded. He came out and said he'd open up the pump for me. Just 'cause you're on a bike. What a goddamn relief. While he was inside, I peered into what would have been the mechanic's workshop. They were all built the same, these old juice stations. Come to think of it, they're all built the same now too. There was an immaculate gold Ford Fairlane in there, plus other vintage cars that I couldn't see. The owner was Greek heritage and was very chatty. Of course he'd be into vintage cars. He was all in his painting gear, so must have been doing some Sunday renos. And he was an ex-rider. I'm too old to recover from injuries if I had a fall. Oh, I'm with you too, mate. That's why I poke along slow. While he unlocked the padlock on the pump, he looked at the lean on my bike and commented, "There's no way I'd be happy with my bike on that lean." It was caring, not criticism, and I briefly explained the whole bike stand saga. I was glad that I could pay him in cash, and after dropping a note on him insisting no change, he dropped his dreams on me. I could tell from a mile away that he was ex-Sydney. He bought this biz but was currently trying to sell it. His next plans in his possibly free bachelor life was to own and live on a houseboat. I explained that I'd looked into that too. I briefly read up on it at Umpinpin while I was looking at the houseboats on the river. It was tricky and you couldn't just live where you liked. Always government fees for mooring or private marina mooring if they allowed houseboats. He said that he was an ex-mariner with one of those New South Wales government departments that dealt with boats and water. I was just excited for him about the houseboat. It'd be easier for me to anchor wherever I liked. Lucky duck. We'd yarned so long and it was time for him to keep painting and for me to keep going. I took the same road I'd come here on, hooked a ride at the little fuelless town and got onto a wider, smoother road all the way to Kyoga. While I was racing along this road trying to beat sundown and dodging the little wallabies that were intermittently feeding along the sides, I heard my motor drop a couple of octaves. I've got an illegal sports exhaust on my bike, Vance & Haynes, straight out of Thailand, and complete with a competition-only metal panel stuck to it, which I'd sanded off after some cops in an RBT op had chatted me about it. I figured that the bike bashing up against the wheel arch had loosened the metal plumbing fastener where the muffler slipped on, or there was a full hole in it and was letting in air. I didn't want to stop as I figured these mountains into Kyoga were going to get hazardous after dark. Plus I was freezing my arse off. I'd pre-booked a cabin in a Kyoga van park. It was like a little log cabin and I welcomed it so much after living in the van on the back of a trailer. Such a weird way to live. Every time I opened the door, people nearby would all look in surprise at this human cargo. At one servo, somewhere in Western Queensland, I was doing something in the back of the van. I'd shut both barn doors when Ralph decided to move the truck. There was nothing to hold on to, so I made the split decision to leap from the moving trailer. It must have looked like a stunt out of a movie. Ralph was hugely apologetic. There were some fun times on that journey. I went into town to grab some tucker. As I was leaning down to undo the bike chain, I felt hot air on my right calf. After executing the waistband and unlocking the combo lock, I leaned the bike on the stand and walked around to check it out. The Vance & Haynes had left the building. So that good sound I'd noticed up in the hills east of here was because I left the muffler back up there. I thought about going out and grabbing it tomorrow, but I knew I couldn't be bothered. At least I'd not get defaulted for an illegal muffler now. I'd tell them it fell off and I had my standard muffler that I was going to fit on. The whole thing was funny to me. I was like a dirt bike dickhead who removed baffles. The next day saw me absolutely floating through the hilly roads known as Thunderbolt's Way, north of Tofton. Thunderbolt was a bikie of sorts, a bushranger who would have ridden it like he stole it. Horse, that is. Like Thunderbolt, I was hitting the bike's top limit. It was only $1.30, but it wasn't anything to be sneezed at. So the lack of muffler didn't impede performance, like I'd been told on Google. Stupid Google. Well, stupid males in chat threads who answer questions with wrong answers just to get their 2 cents worth in there. I had a brother in Tofton, but I wasn't going to ask for a bed with him. The strain between us was not fun. Maybe if I saw him away from my mother, he'd be more himself. His wife didn't like me much, so it was still like my mother was there influencing him. Sons marry their mothers. I get why she didn't like me when I described her as being like her head-fucking mother-in-law. But she gave more than she got, so there was that. It was tough not being close to my siblings, my family. I guess that was why I gravitated so much to Billy, who was also estranged from family. I felt amazing on this ride. Of course it was challenging every time I had to bend down and unchain the bike stand, but I'm nothing if not flexible. I looked on a map and planned to make it to Murrurundi that night. There was a pub that was biker friendly and would have safe parking and probably things to throw under the stand foot for better balance. I loved a pub stay too. The old hotel rooms with their sink in the bedroom and original retro fit outs. More accurately, I hated them. I'd stayed in them on other long haul bike trips, and if there's no other guests staying upstairs in the rooms, it seems to bring out the ghosts. Something I didn't need. The pub ended up being very freshly renovated into modern hotel rooms. No more sinks to piss in when you can't be bothered leaving and locking your room to go to the bathroom. I'll admit I've done this, only in the haunted ones though, or if there's dodgy folks in other rooms that I don't want to run into at 3 a.m. The biker crowd had obviously been good to this pub. I'd been to Murrurundi a couple of times before. The local Vietnam vet chapter held a massive bike show on their land, which had a huge open concert area complete with a stage you'd only find in the wealthiest of regional towns. I made good bank at these shows, and it put me around a demographic that isn't my usual ones at bike shows. Outlaw clubs. This one invited certain patches, such as the Newcastle Mob, the Crusaders, and also seemed to have a relationship with the Boleros. There were lots of social MCs, ones I'd never seen before. Some of them would be little feeder clubs for the outlaw MCs. I didn't know enough to know who fitted where. Their pineapples were all the same shade of gold for me, and certainly not a risk of counterfeit that sometimes happens at markets because there's no CCTV. It was at this show that I first met NG. Naya was a powerful Maori woman, shorter than me and with a huge 1200cc old-style Harley. She was a Mormon and seemed like a really cheery Christian, the only ones I tolerate, who laughed all the time. She belonged to a social motorcycle club, and I wouldn't have expected her to be in with OMCs, even though she had her biker handle of NG. The SMCs adopted OMC things like that to feel tougher because they didn't do crime. We were both excited because we got on like a house on fire and had that childlike joy at making new friends. And particularly as night fell. Bikers get drunker, the stage show gets more cliche with wet t-shirts than strippers. I never hang around during this. Why be around a whole lot of sexually frustrated males who know they'll never get the half-naked women being dangled in front of them on the stage? NG shared this safety protocol, though she backed the wet t-shirt comps. Good on those girls for making money. I sure as shit wasn't about judging or shaming them. I'm just sad that they have to do that for males instead of making male money doing the same things they do. Why do we have to strip when we could make better money doing crime, which we do better than males? At this show I got my first insight into OMC life. NG and I had retired to our own camps. I was trying to sleep, but it wasn't to be, with the pumping 70s rock that's always played at bike shows. I got up for a durry out the back of my van. There were some young blokes nearby who stopped talking when they saw me open up the back doors and put my boots on. I struck up a cigarette and sat on the footstep of my van. I heard the inevitable sexual comments that cockheads say to each other, like they even had a chance of having sex with me. I later saw they were just hangers-on who were emboldened by being friends with bikers. A male from the group came over and started talking normally and nicely to me. He had on the Crusaders colours and was an actual member of an OMC, so he didn't need to be insulting to women. They have no problems getting women, so they don't have that chip on their shoulder. He decided to sit down next to me on the back of the van. His presumption was typical of powerful crims who were used to women fawning over him. I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't even see him properly. He seemed to be tall, bulky and blonde, not my chosen demographic. I let him sit there and touch arms with me because he was good conversation. And I'm not above admitting the power and confidence of OMC club members is something to see. He explained the history of the Crusaders, as they were known, being one of the oldest clubs in Australia, and then he opened up about his unusual life. I don't remember his name, probably preferable to him. He'd been brought up by his solo dad who had taken him out of school on all sorts of jobs with him, some probably criminal. He joined the Crusaders to financially support his dad, which I found quite old school respectful, though unfortunate when a kid ends up parenting their own parent. I own a barber shop in Newcastle and I don't even like going to it. I got my barber in Glenland, this was where he lived. He knew enough to know that his business owning was nothing to skite about, since it would have been thrust on him as a money laundering enterprise where any profits wouldn't go to him. And he couldn't keep it if he somehow quit the club. OMCs were like cults in that way. He admitted way more to me. His separation from his partner, attending anger management to be able to see his kid. Even bikies weren't above the family law court, though that'd be the only court that they were above. You can't intimidate witnesses in family court, as it would only prove you shouldn't be around kids. His tone was more and more morose, and I found myself feeling sorry for the guy. I really wish you peace and happiness, mate. He was genuinely thankful for that. I also added that I wasn't really into male attention at the moment, which was why I was keeping out of the nighttime crowd. I also didn't want to sleep with him. I found him attractive beyond looks, which I couldn't see. He may have been exploiting a woman's empathy, but I believed his unspoken regrets at belonging to such a suffocating organisation as an OMC. The fact he'd been designated a property at the tender age of 25 indicated that he'd probably done some wicked crime, which he basically admitted to. Sometimes blokes don't do the right thing and you have to teach them a lesson. They only respect a good beating. He was clearly trying to justify his violence. I couldn't believe my confidence when I said, "Yeah, sure, but if you beat someone up, they'll get a set against you and eventually get revenge." He quickly changed the subject. The receiver of his violence was probably not alive to seek revenge. I canned this after he tried to tell me what he'd done, but could only say, "I've done some heavy things that I can't tell you about." This was getting more interesting. He was either trying to tune me by admitting that he was the OG bad boy, or he really wanted to get that shit off his chest, but couldn't. The hangers-on who'd obediently left after he'd sat down and started talking to me, they weren't allowed to witness his vulnerable side, obviously, turned up and said some coded shit I didn't really understand, but was probably about some gangbang shit. "The Sarge is looking for you." He made his departure saying he'd come back. I was a bit brief when I replied to not bother as I'd be asleep. I didn't need to be the counsellor after he'd done whatever fucked up things his Sarge was making him do to ensure brotherly loyalty. Go show your rock-hard young cock to your clubmates. It belongs to them after all. And they're probably more turned on by it than me. Statements like this is why I write under a pseudonym. The next morning when I was lying awake, I heard the hangers-on again talking to what I assumed was my bikie from the night before. "Just get in that van and smash her." These fuckheads were still going on with their rapist fantasies. It's an insult to OMCs that hangers-on have this attitude. I'm sure they all commit rape, but OMC members don't really want that kind of illegal activity attention, I guess. Otherwise, he'd have easily been able to do that last night. When you're offered sex from women a lot, you don't have a chip on your shoulder, like the 50-kilo wringing wet weasels that were talking way bigger than their short heights. The bullied who side with the bullies. My bully wasn't saying a thing. I was safe because he was smart. There were no bikers staying at the Murrurundi Hotel this trip, just workers. I ate in the beautifully restored dining room and appreciated the comfort so much after spending all that time in a filthy truck cabin and eating servo food. The next morning I'd planned to stop through Sydney and buy a new stand at a bike store. It was absolutely freezing at 80 kilometres per hour as I took off in the clear, crisp morning air. I'd be home in a double bed by this evening.